Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar, Staying Resilient, Strategies for Nonprofits in Times of Change. Our agenda for today is we are going to review the current landscape of the nonprofit market. We're going to have a session with Finnovate for Good. Then the Sparkrock team will give you an overview and provide a demo, and we'll close out with the Q&A. But in the meantime, let's introduce who's here. So I'm going to start from left to right. Gary, it's your turn.
Thank you, Bree. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. Just to say a few words about myself. I am a senior account executive at Sparkrock. Been working in the ERP space for over a decade now, helping both for-profit and non-for-profit, at least initially in my career, finding the right solution. But in the past few years, I've focused more and exclusively on the non-for-profit, and this is how I ended up joining Sparkrock.
And I'm Andrew Horrow. I'm the founder and partner at Finnovate for Good. And by day, I'm also the director of finance at Fifth Avenue Committee, an affordable housing nonprofit in Brooklyn. I've spent over 15 years in the nonprofit sector in audit, tax, and consulting. And my goal is really to help nonprofits get the most out of their resources and bang for their buck, whether it's process, systems, or people.
And my name is Jennifer Hume, and I'm one of the pre-sales consultants here at Sparkrock. I've been at Sparkrock for 4 years, and before that, I was a customer for 12 years. I am a CPA, so I have experience using this solution personally. So I am very excited to give you a demo a little bit later on in the Sparkrock product.
And I'm Brianna Ramsden. I'm the marketing manager here at Sparkrock, and I'll be running the slides and manning the Q&A. I've spent 15 years working with nonprofits, providing training, events, and marketing. So a quick little housekeeping before we jump right in is we are going to have mics muted when we aren't talking, just so we don't hear any background noises. We will be providing a copy of this webinar within the next week. So if you have to jump early, you have a colleague who can't make it, feel free to send them. And you can put all of your questions into the Q&A box. So Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Bree. I believe the control of the screen, here we go. All right, so to talk about how nonprofit could stay resilient in time of change, we first need to discuss the current landscape and the current state of the nonprofit first, right? There is one reality that most nonprofit if not all nonprofit have to deal with, and I'm pretty sure everybody in this webinar can relate to that they are strapped for resources. Nonprofit operate on very, very tight budget, right? They literally have to scratch their head to make sure that they have the resources and get all their program and project running. And most of the budget is channeled directly to their mission, and rightfully so, right? But as a result of this, the technology they use often lag behind, right? Very outdated solution. They find themselves using those older system and software that are 10, 15 years old, and even more sometime, right? And this is usually your on-premise legacy system, very old, outdated, inefficient, inadequate, that requires a lot of work. But when you have to deal with limited budget, limited resources, how do you make those decisions, right? Why would you go and spend more money to fix something or improve something that your organization been using for many, many years? What we've seen is that a lot of the decision around technology is actually reactive, right? It happens when there is no other choice. Typically, when the system is no longer, using the system is no longer an option, right? The system is reaching end of life. And what does it mean? It means that the solution is getting retired. So no more new features, no more improvement, no more updates available, no bug fixing, not even the security patches, right? And the idea of being vulnerable to any technical issues, errors, bug without any support whatsoever is not something that an organization will want, right? And this is usually, in many cases, when a lot of nonprofits start looking around and trigger the signal for modernization. But it's literally because, well, at this point, well, there is no other option. But way before the legacy provider announced the retirement of his solution, those organizations were already keenly aware of many concerns around the increasing technology gap with their system, right? Lack of compatibility, lack of automation, meaning an atrocious amount of manual work and inefficiencies that deeply impact and cripple the organization every single day. But because of those budgetary constraints and limitation, decision become about the technology and whether that technology is still available, instead of being about the processes, right? And how those processes support the organization. But I think this is not a debate, right? I'm very positive that every nonprofit agrees that the organization should be modernized and should go to a digital transformation, not because, well, the legacy system is reaching end of life, of course, but because the well-being of the organization requires it. Having said that, right, how do we reconcile this requirement with the budget limitation? And to that picture that is already present a lot of challenges, you also want to add a bit of unexpected situation, right? Maybe, I don't know, a scenario where the government decide to temporarily freeze all federal grants and pause the fundings of your programs, right? That could happen. And obviously, this creates a lot of stress, right? Uncertainty and risk for your organization. And of course, the important word here is uncertainty. And this is the kind of word that could paralyze your organization, right? And maybe the typical reaction would be, well, let's wait and see what happens. But even though that situation that we are going through now is a bit extreme and radical situation, unexpected scenarios are still meant to happen, right? And actually, there is a study that shows that 65% of nonprofit organizations receive less funding than what they have forecasted every year. And that gap between the forecasted amount and the actual budget could be as high as 30%, right? So maybe while you don't get the funding that you were expected, maybe you don't receive as much donation, maybe you have an employee that is leaving that you're not able to replace, right? Many government decisions can impact your ability to hire new staff and to fill position. So unexpected happens, right? And regardless, well, you still need to run your operation. Your organization still need to function. You still have a community that heavily relies on your services and your ability to assist them, right? So we don't want the conversation to be centered around specific event. It's really about staying resilient and prepared in any circumstances, right? But how do you get there? So to help us to discuss this topic and answer that question, I'm going to pass it on to Andrew, who brings his experience and expertise, not only, as he mentioned, as a CFO, but also as a consultant. So Andrew, we'd like to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting time for nonprofits, and we'll go through some of it, but I think as this slide kind of says is, and I'm going to skip to the second bullet, staying still isn't safe. And I think a lot of nonprofits sometimes just getting through the day is sometimes how we operate. I know that there are days where I am as a CFO, I'm just like, it would be easier to keep doing what we're doing and maybe take 6 hours of my day rather than take the time to invest it to change. And I think thinking about that change and how do we break through that change inertia to set up our organizations for that future state, to be able to pivot and be dynamic as the world around us change day to day. And just to think about the current landscape, I mean, I'm not going to lie, everybody knows this funding's tight. We're being asked to do more with less again and again and again. And pretty much every day there's another reason that's happening. And I know if you're a 630 entity, you're budgeting right now and coming to grips with that. Or if you're a 1231 entity, you might be reforecasting and rebudgeting and trying to figure out how are we going to stretch our dollar every way. And I think, and we'll get to a little later, it's funny to think about investing in fintech at this point. It's a little bit of a ridiculous conversation to have while your program people are stretching the dollar so far to say, hey, I need a new accounting system. but to think about how to make that progress, how to be able to, at a moment's notice, your executive director comes to you and says, hey, what are our numbers? What's the forecast? What is our cash flow? To be able to have a system that gives you that real-time reporting, I think, is key, so that if there are opportunities, because in the nonprofit space, there might be some constriction, there might be some mergers, to be able to jump at funding opportunity as they become available, new ones, old ones, I think is key. And making sure that you are innovating, and that if you think about the last time you innovated your process and technology was when COVID first hit, we're not really at the place we should be, because I think a lot of people just found ways to work through it, whether it was adding a check writing service as part of my bank or somewhat digitizing my accounts payable. Have you reevaluated that since you were in a panic at that time in February of 2020? So making sure that you are looking forward, having that plan. Where does the organization want to go, and how is your finance team going to move with it? And I think thinking about, as you look at your finance department and organization as a whole, I always say at nonprofits, every problem can stem back through one of three things. It's either going to be people, process, or systems. And I always joke when I talk to people, when I do webinars, that at nonprofits, especially in the finance department, it's almost never going to be the people. I have never found a nonprofit finance department that is overstaffed, that can do more. They're usually stretched really thin. They're usually very creative, but it's almost never the people. And sometimes maybe we have to upskill our people. We have to bring them into the new way of thinking, bring them some AI, some automation. But I think it's changing that way of thinking and not necessarily the people. Going to what are the common issues we see? It's really process and systems. And sometimes those processes were put in place 10 years ago when we were a different organization with even a different mission, but different revenue streams, different revenue size, and they just don't fit right now. And then systems, as Gary said, sometimes they're outdated. They just don't work for us. The real question to ask is, does your system work for you, or do you spend all day working around your system? How much time do you really spend in Excel and not in your system is a good thing. I know us accountants, we all love Excel, but if you're doing all your reporting out of an Excel spreadsheet and not your accounting system, something's not working. And what this leads to, it leads to a lot of burnout, inefficiencies, missed opportunities, and it will hold your organization back, especially as you go through these uncertain, tough times. If you have people leaving because of burnout or because of they're just fed up with doing the same things day after day that just are high labor intensive, you lose all that institutional knowledge. And if it isn't systematized, the way your organizations could function could walk right out the door. And it's really, I think a lot of nonprofits have been for the past 3 months, but over the next few months are thinking it may not necessarily be about growth right now. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Do you want to grow? Do you want to constrict? Or do you want to sustain? And I know a lot of nonprofits I'm talking to, it's just over the next 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, how are we going to sustain at our current level? Maybe when we did our strategic plan 1.5 years ago, we had this high growth trajectory. Well, the landscape in the world is what it is. So let's see, how can we sustain? How can we make the most out of what we have and stretch our dollars as far as we can to make sure that we are still meeting the needs of our mission and our communities? And I will say most of the time, the answer will start with better systems and better processes that are going to support your people. And they're going to allow them to their highest and best use. I always say the easiest example I can always give is accounts payable, because everybody has to pay bills, unfortunately. And when I think of some of these AP people I've met at nonprofits, a lot of them are still heavy in paper. I know my organization is, we're slowly moving off it. But my AP person, she spends most of her day just entering invoices into a system and scanning in pieces of paper. And if we move to an AP automation software, it's not that she's out of a job. It's that now I can have her actually reviewing invoices and talking to vendors who she's known for 10, 15 years and has relationships with, that maybe she can work out discounts or figure out better ways to do things. But right now she is so bogged down in an outdated process that we can't get any purchasing power or have some thinking. It's allowing our people to really do that next level of thinking. Let's get away from data entry and more towards data analysis. So now, what are the reasons to revamp processes? I always say that to revamp your processes without revamping your systems, that's free. All it costs is your time. And I know sometimes right now the constraint is budget, budget, budget. So let's see what we can do. How can we get the most out of what we're using today to stretch it as much as possible to see where we truly need that new system? And there's some cases where it's going to go hand in hand with the new system, because the way we do things in our system today might not work when we move to Sparkrock. And think about how to blend those streamlined processes with a streamlined system. But when I think about revamped processes, it's taking a look at what reporting you're giving to funders, management, and your auditors. Those are usually your big three. And then going back to what data is going into your system. And A, is that giving you the enough detail to do that reporting you need? But B, you're at your input source, are you giving too much detail? The example I always give is I worked with an organization who was a $5 million organization, and they would budget down to the penny. And they would come budget time, they prepare these grand spreadsheets that they supplied to management that really would just have every single detail of everything being spent. Now at a program level, I absolutely loved it. The program people really wanted to know what their budget was. They were really protective of it. They didn't spend over their budget. It created a very healthy relationship. But these spreadsheets they were preparing to finance when they became a $50 million organization, finance wasn't using them anymore. Finance wasn't looking at any of the detail. They were just looking at the cover page and bringing that over into the organizational budget as they figured out their sources and uses. So it turned out when they would spend days and nights and weekends preparing these spreadsheets, no one used them. And what it took was me as a consultant sitting back and go, let's look at the whole budgeting process holistically and see if we can cut out some steps that maybe just aren't needed anymore. And we were able to save this organization weeks in their budget process, because while the program team still had the detail, they kept it in a way that was useful to them, not the way they thought finance wanted it and the way finance wanted it 5 years ago. And I think sometimes taking that step back and really just, even on a big piece of paper, just writing out your process in a flow chart. Let's look at it from 10,000 feet to see if there's any part of this that we can kind of get rid of. I mean, going back to your AP process, I see a lot of nonprofits have very overly complicated approval processes. And how can we slim that down so when a bill gets in, maybe it's only looked at 2 people instead of 5, and we can get things through the queue faster and then get them paid and keep our vendors happy. And it really, like I said, the key, I think, to all these process revamp and system revamp is how can we get people away from data entry more towards data analysis, to be able to look at how we are serving our communities, how we're serving our missions, how we're serving our students, how we're serving the needy people in our area, and being able to supply our program people, our management, our board with the necessary information to make those complex, hard decisions about what the true next step forward for your organization is. And really, it's about becoming that forward-thinking finance department. Gone are the days, I always used to joke about 10 years ago when I worked in the accounting department. Accounting was what was happening yesterday, treasury was what was about happening today, and finance was happening about tomorrow. But I think in the nonprofit world, accounting has to do all of that. Not many nonprofits at a level I'm working with have a FP&A department, have a treasury department. It all falls on your CFO, controller, and staff accountant. And sometimes all 3 of those are the same person. So thinking about how you can make these processes such that you have those good internal controls, you have those checks and balances, but it allows you that time to actually look at the numbers. If you're just printing your monthly reports and sending them out without taking the time to look at, hey, where are we overspending? What doesn't look right? It's just, you're going to get bogged down in corrections and no time looking at how is the program functioning? How can we do better? Is there a way to streamline this? And just getting to that data and making better decisions. So once you've looked at your processes holistically, it's like, how can we improve our systems? And goes back to what I said in the beginning. It's a very interesting time for nonprofits. Like I said, it's a somewhat, I can imagine sitting in a management team going, we're going to cut this program, we're going to cut these people. Now let's make the investment in a new accounting system. On the face of it, I understand how ridiculous it can be, but if your organization needs this, now is the time for many reasons, but you're never going to have more funding than you have today. And I would say in the next 18 months to 2 years, you're never going to have as much staff time as you do right now. And these things take time. So if you take a step back, look at your processes and go, I am taking my system to its outer limits. It cannot do anything more than I want to. It is not giving me the ability to do it. Then think about making that change. The time is now. And I think having those improvements will only make your organization better and more able to, when the world opens back up, hopefully in the nonprofit sector, your organization will be ready to either expand, merge in other organizations, or just be able to reach that mission more critically. And I think funding is always going to be tight at nonprofits, especially when it comes to the finance department. We usually get the end of the funding tree, as it will. But thinking about how it's going to help those other departments. If you had a better system and were able to say have non-financial data mixed in automatically with your financial data, what does that mean to the reports you give to your program people? Are you going to be able to give more reporting and more information that's maybe more legible to a non-financial person? I know there are many financial softwares out there where it has great reporting for an accountant. Not everybody's an accountant, especially in the nonprofit world. So thinking about what can you offer to your program people? How is this switch of an accounting system or switch of a system going to help everybody in the organization, not just the accounting staff? And I think delaying these types of decisions only become more costly. If you, as Gary said, there are systems being sunsetted, systems being changed. If you're on a system that you know is going to be sunsetted, it's only going to become more expensive to make the change as you get closer to it, because that time crunch is going to be more and more. And not only is it going to be more dollars out of your wallet to do that implementation, to buy that system, it's going to be more resources from you and your team to do that. And thinking about holistically, how can you have a system that can do everything for you? I talk to a lot of nonprofits right now, and a lot of program people and executive directors have that thing of, I have 16 logins and I can't keep track. I know during my day job, I have 2 accounting systems. I can barely keep track of my passwords in those 2 accounting systems, let alone my HR, my payroll, my credit cards, my AP. Thinking about, are there systems where we can bring everything together, have that single source of information, which then integrates together to feed all our stuff? Is there a system where I can have HR and payroll and it'll automatically flow to my finance system because they're connected? And knowing that all my data is in one place, that I'm not going to have a connector breakdown, or when I update my chart of accounts, it's not going to flow to my payroll system. Just thinking about how you can bring all those together. And I always say, if you've ever sat and thought there's a better way to do things, there probably is. And these modern tools out there just make things so much better and so much easier. And the last thing I'm going to hit on before I'll hand it back over to the team at Sparkrock is, when you're thinking about the landscape for talent and how to retain and attract people, technology is helping, especially the younger generation. If they walk into your office to interview, if they come in person, I know most interviews are done via Zoom and Skype these days, but to walk into the interview and you see tons of paper, that might be a red flag. Somebody might look at that and go, you know what? I am not going to work there because it's just paper everywhere. And that's going to be my life. And that's usually a sign of, hey, we don't have a hybrid work environment. Everybody has to be on person because we're in paper. So thinking about how you can digitize things, having those modern tools. A lot of younger staff are coming in and have used things in college or used things at other jobs that if you are not modernizing your platforms or your systems, and if you pull up your accounting system and it looks like it's from the Windows 3.1 or MS-DOS, that's going to turn them off. No accountant wants to turn on their system and it look like the old AS400, and I'm dating myself here, but they want something that looks modern and is easy to use and it's easy to translate into normal speak. And I think it really allows people to work to their highest and best use, and thinking about what kind of people you want. How do you want your people to grow and learn? being able to have these modern solutions allow them to really put the time in they need to do that job to take their experience and your organization to the next level. So now we've talked about why you should make the investment. Let's talk about where you can make the investment. So I'm going to turn it back over to Gary to kind of talk about Sparkrock.
Thank you, Andrew. And well, as Andrew mentioned, it's really about being forward thinking and being proactive, right? And start thinking about the tools that will improve your processes and will support your team, right? Tool just like Sparkrock 365. And I know you all want to see the demo and what your solution can do. But before we do that, before we actually jump into the demo, I'd like to talk a little bit about who we are. And this is mainly for those of you that may not be as familiar with Sparkrock, right? So this will give you a little bit more context on what we do and why Sparkrock should come to mind when we talk about being resilient and being ready as a non-for-profit organization. So a little over 20 years ago, as we identified a gap in the market when it comes to non-profit organization, and because back then, the nonprofit was an underserved market, to say the least, with very unsophisticated product. And this is how Sparkrock was born in 2003, with that desire to provide nonprofit with a budget solution. And in order for us to achieve this goal, we look at the best possible partner that we can imagine. And this is why we decided right from the beginning to partner with Microsoft. And when most people think about Microsoft, they do not think about ERP, right? But Microsoft actually been a huge player in this market for over 30 years. And of course, over time, over the past decades, Microsoft solution evolved, right? Through technology, through innovation. And as they grew well, so did we. And today, we are built on top of Microsoft Cloud solution called Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. Some of you may be familiar with that solution. And as you can see on the screen here, our solution sits and lives within the Microsoft Dynamics 365 environment. And some of you may wonder, well, okay, so you are part of the Microsoft ecosystem, and what do you add to that ecosystem? What makes your solution so unique? So what we find, actually, let me just pause here. Are you able to see the slide moving?
No,
We're still
Gary,
on
we
our
can't.
company.
Oh,
there we go.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So let me just step back a little bit. All right, this is the slide that you missed, right? So I was saying, as you can see from that slide, Sparkrock 365 lives within the Microsoft environment. And what we find with our experience is that when you work with nonprofit organization, is that Business Central, and actually like any organization that are made specifically for-profit organization, or any solution that made specifically for-profit organization, are missing those key functionalities that nonprofit organization really need, right? Because the Business Central as is a great solution. It's great for businesses, right? But businesses are focused on the revenue coming in the organization. They will be on top of their sales, their margin, their inventory, maybe. But when you think about nonprofit, you generally have fewer source of revenue, a bigger chunk of that revenue since you are dealing with your grants and your donation, right? So nonprofit are actually focused on the expenses, the money going out of the organization. So it's all about how you spend that money, making sure that every cent is properly accounted for, right? Especially since you must report back to your funders. So you have to think about requirements around the requisition, the invoice approval, the commitment and encumbrances, project and grant accounting around specific reports, right? Complex regulatory reports that you have and that do not exist for-profit organization. And this is why the typical ERP solution do not work for non-profit organization, right? And those that end up using those tools that were specifically designed for businesses end up wasting a lot of time, a lot of resources, and having to implement a lot of manual processes. So in short, what we did is that we look at the level of sophistication that a solution like Business Central have on the revenue side, and we bring the same level of sophistication to the expense management side. And actually, before we came along and founded Sparkrock 20 years ago, nonprofit had pretty much the choice between number one, the well-established, well-known, general-purpose ERP solution designed for businesses, right? And as we discussed, this is not ideal. And number two is a niche ERP solution built specifically for the not-for-profit organization, right? And while this seems better because, well, you have all the features that you need, unfortunately, those niche solutions are not as robust and as well developed as the solution available for businesses, right? Because in many cases, those are just small business startup, and worse, they lack the stability and security that large organization could offer. So with Sparkrock, what we do is that we bring together in one side all the security and the stability of the Microsoft infrastructure, and on the other side, the sector-specific expertise of Sparkrock, right, with all those features and functionalities that are specific to the needs of non-for-profit. So really, you get the best of both worlds. So what we bring to the table is really that capacity to leverage Microsoft investment in Business Central, which is significant because Microsoft literally invests millions of dollars in its solution, right? And of course, it is the Microsoft cloud infrastructure. You can access it anywhere, anytime, on any device. But it is also the privacy, the security, the features, the functionalities, the interconnectivities with the Microsoft environment itself, right? With Office 365, Team, Power Apps, you name it, right? And of course, now the AI technology with Microsoft Copilot. And when you put together that ability to leverage Microsoft with more specialized capability and features, then you get the power of Sparkrock 365. Those here on the screen are all the modules that are available into the system. Well, not only it's a cloud-based application, of course, but it is a fully integrated solution, right? Everything that you see here, all those modules live in a single unified application. Like for instance, with the purchasing module, if you purchase fixed asset, right, the system will automatically update the acquisition costs and automatically change the appreciation schedule as well. If you get into the HR payroll, for example, as well, if you need those functionality, once payroll is posted, it just automatically in the system, right, and the general ledger. So no extra step required. As soon as payroll is done, you can immediately run your reports. So I think this gives you a pretty good understanding of what we do. But before I hand it over to Jennifer for the live demo, I just want to add that for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to focus on just one module, right? And there are many challenges that keep your team up at night, right? All those tasks that Andrew mentioned that are time consuming and devour a huge amount of resources. But the number one difficulty that we consistently hear about is corporate credit card expense claim. It is literally an issue that affects all nonprofit organizations that we have been talking to. And without the proper tool, any change will directly impact it. And this is why this is the one we picked to demo today. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer for the demo.
Thanks, Gary. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And I can certainly agree with Gary when he talks about one of the areas that is a huge time suck, we'll say, for many finance departments, and that is the employee expenses and employee credit cards. So I am very excited to show everyone here today what Sparkrock can do and hopefully make people's lives a little bit easier in the end. So now that I've got all that, my screen's all sorted out here, we're first going to talk about employee expenses. And when I get into the system, I'm going to show you different types of employee expenses that employees can enter in the system. So first one will be a corporate credit card. The next one is going to be a reconciliation of a corporate credit card expense. Then we're going to look at a reimbursable expense and then a couple of different ways to do mileage expense. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate into our employee self-service, which is a web application called My Sparkrock. My Sparkrock is designed to provide a modern, responsive experience across desktops, tablets, even mobile devices. In my Sparkrock, employees are able to add and code expenses. They can upload receipts. They can submit claims. They're also able to track expense claim statuses. And something that is very unique to Sparkrock is the ability for employees or managers to perform budget checking prior to submitting or approving claims. So this will ensure that expenses are properly approved and are within budget. So let's get right into the expenses. And first thing I'm going to show you is the credit card functionality. So the credit card functionality starts on the AP side where you import all of your transactions. And I will get into much more detail in the next section when I do talk about P cards and corporate expense cards. But for now, we're going to take a look at the employee experience and how they handle their responsibility to code their P card expense. So you can see here that when I hover over this, it's a corporate purchase card expense. So that means that this expense has been pushed out from Sparkrock 365 and from a credit card statement. So I'm going to show you how you can go into the expense. So as the employee, then they can go in and fill in an expense type. Expense types, you can do a lot with expense types depending on how you set them up. So for example, if you have a GL account set up within the expense type, then I can also have it so employees can't change that GL account when they choose that expense type. So this really helps with coding for employees, making sure that it's done correctly. So also when using expense types, you can get minimum allowable amounts. You can also indicate whether a receipt is required and even create minimum thresholds where you indicate if an expense exceeds an amount that they must have a receipt attached. You can also have guidelines set here so employees can go directly into maybe a policy manual. You could also split the line if you want this expense to go maybe to do 2 different cost centers. It can be done there. This is where you would enter the receipt. So if I go ahead and with Sparkrock, all you need to do is do a drag and drop. And if you are doing this from your phone, you can actually just use your camera, take a picture of the receipt, and that's all you need to do. So from here, we've got our GL account. We can also add additional cost centers through account sets in Sparkrock. And once that's all entered, I can go ahead and save that. And now it's ready to be put onto an expense claim. But we're going to do a few more things before I get to that. So the next feature that I want to show you actually came directly from a customer's recommendation. They had many P card and corporate credit cards, and they wanted to have their employees have the ability to enter and code their expenses just on the fly, and then do a reconciliation at the end of the month or the end of the credit card statement period. So this is what we created. So here you can see that this expense came through with the credit card. And this expense here was actually entered during the month when I actually had this expense occurred. So this is some gas that was purchased. So I've got it all coded. I even have the receipt already attached. So when I go into my credit card expense to do my responsibility, which is to actually code and add the receipt. So when I go into here, instead of adding an expense type, I can go to here where it says move from expense. And then I can choose which expense that I'm moving it from. And now it's pulling all of that information that was in that expense and it's bringing it into this credit card expense. So you can see all of my coding and my receipt has also been brought over. So now I'm going to go ahead and save. And when I go back into my expenses, we're going to be able to see that those 2 expenses now have been collapsed into one, which is the credit card expense. So now let's move on to a reimbursable expense. So I'm going to create a new expense from scratch. Again, I'm going to populate my expense type. So I bought some office supplies. I can put in the detail. I bought a mouse and it was $25.50 and each. And now again, I pull in my receipt. So I've added that receipt and I can go ahead and create what other cost centers that I need to attach because my GL account is there as well. And now I'm going to save this. So again, this is the desktop view that I'm showing you, but this can also be done very easily on a mobile device as well. So the next expense I want to show you is the mileage. And there's actually two ways that mileage can be set up, and you can use both. One way is through locations. So you can have predefined mileage that employees would just go in and populate, or the other way is just having the employee enter in their own mileage. So we're going to take a look at our mileage expense types here. So I've got some, I'll show you the location to location first. So here employees would enter the details of the mileage and maybe predefined location. So they're going from one location to a superstore. Maybe they're doing Tuesday shopping. So it's 55 miles. But if it is a round trip, they can just hit the round trip and then it'll automatically double the mileage for you. And now I'm going to go in, I'm going to choose a cost center, and I can go ahead and save this as well. So the other way of doing the mileage is where an employee would actually just type in the number of miles that they've used, which can also be set up. So this actually tells the employee right away how many miles they have already claimed this year. Again, you can have links put in here for policies. So the quantity here, let's say they went 25 miles and it's automatically calculating it. And again, if it's a round trip, they can use that feature there as well. Again, the account set the cost center, just to add a little bit more information. And then we can go ahead and save that. Now, when it comes that time of the month and they need to actually create their expense claim, they can go up here, they can choose all of the expenses, and they can make a new claim right in the system here. So the system is set up very flexible for you. You can have different types of claims. So this is, we're just going to say this is for May. Now, you can see here the total amount of the claim is $459.04, but the employee is only going to receive $130.56 because the rest of it are those credit card expenses that the employee isn't getting reimbursed for. But what's going to happen is they've now done the coding. So when accounts payable receives that information and the expense claim is approved, then it's going to clear out the clearing account. So from here, employee can go ahead and they can see all of the expenses. When I scroll down, you can see I've got one here. This is in red, so that means there's a problem with it. I haven't actually gone in and coded it, so I could go in and edit it here, or I can even just attach it if if that's something that I'm just going to wait and I'm going to do that in the next month. So I've successfully detached it. And now this, again, I had mentioned at the start about the budget checking. So this is something very unique to Sparkrock. And you may not want to have this for your employees, but it's a great feature to give to those supervisors and managers so they can see that these expenses are well within budget, so they're all good to go, and there's no concern about overspending here, because as nonprofits all know, you really got to keep an eye on those dollars that are being spent. So from here, the employee can go ahead and they can submit their expenses for approval. Now, as an employee, they can always go back in and take a look and find out the status of all of their claims. So you can see here that some of them have been completed, so I know that I've gotten paid for it. Other ones are completed and waiting for approval, and then there's ones that have been approved as well. And if I go back into my expenses, you can see here's that one expense that I detached from the claim. So it's not that this expense will ever get lost. It will always be in the employee's self-service waiting for that coding to get done. So now let's take a look at the P card and the corporate credit cards. And I am going to navigate into Sparkrock 365. And in many of the webinars that we do, we use the Accounting Manager Role Center. But today I thought I'd mix it up a little bit, and I'm actually in the Accounts Payable Coordinator Role Center. So it's just a little bit different. It's more looking at vendors and outstanding payments and vendor certifications, things like that accounts payable individuals need to see. So if we take a look at the vendors here, I'm going to show you my corporate credit card. And I'm going to go into my corporate Visa just to show you how this is set up in the system. So this invoice type, it means it's a purchasing card so that the system knows that that's what type of vendor it is. And this here is an important part. So this is the default GL code that it's going to be used. And this is for so that when I create the invoice, that invoice is going to be charged to this GL, which is my P card and corporate credit card clearing account. So once the vendor is set up like that, then you can set up your purchasing cards. Go into our purchasing cards. So this you can have as many and as different types of purchasing and P cards that you have. I've only set up a corporate Visa, but you can have many different credit cards. And then this number here, so you can see that myself, James, and Sherry, we're all on the same corporate Visa. But here are those distinct numbers, right? That's on your credit card. So this is how we're telling the system that this card belongs to me. And when that credit card statement comes in, that here is my Sparkrock username so that it knows where actually to send out all of those charges. So the next step is to actually download your bank statement. And to do that, we're going to go into our purchase card journal and we're going to import. And again, with all of the attaching in Sparkrock, it's a drag and drop. So I'm going to go ahead. I've pre-populated something. It's quite simple, but it gives you the idea. It brings in all of the purchasing cards, who it's for, and then the actual details. And it actually has a column here for warnings. So if something didn't import in properly, it would give you that warning before you would go ahead and process it. But everything looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and process this journal. And the new invoice has been created. So I'm going to go ahead. I am going to open this invoice. I'm going to show you the invoice. But before I go today, I am going to switch back to my Sparkrock just to show you how all of those entries then got brought in. So here is your purchase invoice. You'd fill in the amount of the invoice. So we can go ahead and put that in here. So this whole invoice now is going to be charged to that clearing account. So this tells you this is the number that was pulled right from the vendor card. So that's the clearing account. And all of the entries are going to sit in this clearing account until the employee goes in and they code their expenses. And then it gets approved with the process that I showed you. So you don't have to worry about sending out statements to employees and highlighting which ones they need to code and trying to get all that information back into the system and get that invoice paid on time. You don't have to worry about that anymore because it's just going to put it into that clearing account. And then once those expenses are actually coded, then it's going to clear it out of the expense or out of the holding account. So from here, you can go ahead, you can just post the invoice, and then it will just be picked up on your regular, whether it's a check run or an ACH run, will just be picked up from there. So let's flip over to to my Sparkrock. We'll just do a bit of a refresh here on the expenses. So you can see here, those are the 3 entries that you saw where I brought into the system and then pushed it out to the employee self-service. So now we're gonna take a look at the accounts payable from their perspective when they get approved claims. So here we can see, here is this claim that I entered it. I submitted the claim, and now the accounts payable person can see it. So there are warnings that can be set up. So for instance, on this internal mileage here, you can see that the distance is verified because I used that type of mileage claim. But if we go down to the other mileage, then it's telling the accounts payable person that that is an unverified amount. I just typed it in myself, and whether you have policies set up within your system on what employees can claim or not. But this is really where Andrew was talking about I made a little sticky note here for myself, right? Data entry versus data analysis, right? You have your accounts payable person doing the analysis instead of just feverishly trying to punch in these account numbers and cost center numbers and things like that. So we're trying to get the system to do that data entry work for you, and then they're doing the analysis. So another thing to show you is another expense claim that I have entered in here by James. So you can see here duplicate expense warning. So it's telling the system that it kind of looks like there might be 2 expenses that look the same. It might be completely valid that James actually bought 2 headsets and it was authorized, but it's just giving that individual, the accounts payable person, the pause to make sure that this is a valid expense. And they can also go into the attachments and actually take a look to see if it is a valid expense. Because you might have people, especially with if they are claiming breakfast or lunch, they might even eat from the same place and eat the same thing for more than 1 meal. So it could be a valid expense. So once the accounts payable person is satisfied, they can go in and make adjustments to the accounts, any of the cost centers, those types of things can all be adjusted. They can also reject and reopen and reject the claim if there was something that was done incorrectly to be sent back to the employee. And once they're satisfied with it, then they can go ahead and create the purchase document, and this will create the accounts payable invoice for the employee so that they can get paid. And then the other thing it does is it will create the entry to clear out that P-card clearing account. So just to review what I talked about today, I have a review slide for us. So we start with that P-card or corporate credit card statement. Then we pushed out all of those expenses to all of the employees. Then the employees go in, they can have expenses that they're completing themselves that they want reimbursement for. But then they can also have all of their purchase expenses also on that claim. They can do the coding for it and then send it through an approval process. And it also has the budget checking. You don't want to forget that. And then on the other side in Sparkrock 365, that credit card statement gets posted into that clearing account. And then is cleared out once the expense claim has been approved and posted in the system. So that concludes the demo. I think I have 1 minute extra. I think I did okay there on timing. I didn't go on too long. So I'm going to go ahead and forward here to the Q&A. And I guess I hand it back to, hand it back to Bree.
Thank you, Jen. I love seeing your demos. I like peeking into the system, but that's because I'm on the marketing side. So I do have 2 questions that were pre-submitted. And in the meantime, feel free to add any questions that you have into the Q&A. So my first question, pretty sure is for Andrew. How would you go about starting this evaluation with limited time and resources?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question because obviously there's so many places to start, and I meet a lot of financial leaders who get overwhelmed by that idea where to start. But it's just take a step back. I always ask in my assessment, the last question we ask to get to the heart of everybody's issue: if you had unlimited resources and unlimited time, what's the first thing you would change? And that usually gets to the heart of where your biggest problem is. So I'd always think, if you think of that, if you had a magic wand, what would you change first? And then start your evaluation there, because that's going to hopefully get to the heart of your problem. Then you can start peeling back the layers of that onion to figure out where does the problem lie, people, process, or systems.
Now, question number 2, I want to say is for Gary. So we are built on Microsoft, but what if someone else, another company, is on the Google ecosystem? Can we still work with them?
All right, thank you, Bree. That's a great question. I found that many people may assume that, well, because we are a Microsoft solution, you may need Microsoft to use our solution, but we actually don't discriminate, right? We welcome everyone. So if you're coming from Google or any other platform, then you can still use our solution. We understand that there are a lot of organizations out there that are Google shop, right? So feel free to reach out. And even though we are so fully integrated with the Microsoft ecosystem, so I just want to stress that you actually do not need any Microsoft licenses or any specific solution from Microsoft to be able to use Sparkrock.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions right now. I'm curious if anyone is typing maybe. We'll give it another minute and then we are almost at the end of our time.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, the one thing I'll add at the end here to wrap it up is just everything Jen showed and we all talked about is thinking about in your organizations, where is this going to save me time? And I think a lot of this conversation is it helps within your organization think about how is this going to affect the other teams. So when you think about those expenses, you think about those P cards, how is it going to help my employees in the field, actually in the community, that they're not going to have to take their receipts from the Costco where they bought the case of water for the event on Saturday, tape it to a piece of paper, scan it in the copier, and hope it gets to finance to get reimbursed. It's now all in a system that, because it's built off Microsoft, everybody's used Excel, like it or not. So I think that's one of the beauties, and I know we didn't get into it too much, of Sparkrock. It's built on Microsoft, so it's accessible to 99% of the people who use it. It doesn't look like an accounting system. So I think that's what I would end with here.
Thank you, Andrew. And I want to thank you for joining us today, Andrew. It's always fun chatting with you. And thank you to our team and everyone who's shown up today, everyone who has registered. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to our team at our email, which is connect@sparkrock.com, and we will send this webinar to you within the next week. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.